Good morning, and thank you for joining me for today's midweek reflection. I dare say many of us have been very, very deeply moved by images that we've seen in recent days from Afghanistan. Images of people desperately and frantically fleeing for their lives for fear of what the future might bring under Taliban rule. And I'm, like many others, hugely struck by the many sacrifices that have been made by so many people over these decades to try to build a better and a more hopeful and a freer Afghanistan for the people who live there, and not least for Afghanistan's women and girls. And so it's this notion of sacrifice that I just want to take a moment to think about with you this morning. Last week I was fortunate to see a very thoughtful and hard-hitting play at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe called Shell Shock. And it told the story of a British soldier returning from Afghanistan and how in the months and years that followed, bit by bit, his life seemed to just fall apart. And it fell apart not for want of people around him caring about him and loving him. They did, but it was just that he couldn't go back to the person that he was and the life that he had after what he'd been through. And those around him, they simply couldn't connect with, they couldn't relate to the trauma and the pain that he was undergoing in the wake of war. And so many British men and women over the last 20 years did sacrifice their future mental health, did in many, many cases sacrifice their limbs, and in at least 400 instances gave up their lives for the sake of trying to build a better nation there. A few days ago saw the 80th anniversary of the death of Maximilian Kolbe. Maximilian Kolbe was a Polish Franciscan Catholic priest who was arrested by the Nazis in 1941, and he was incarcerated in Auschwitz concentration camp. And sometime after he was taken there, one of the camp inmates managed to successfully escape from Auschwitz. And the camp deputy commander was so outraged, was so furious about this, that he decided to exact a very fierce punishment that would deter people from trying to escape again. And so he summarily picked 10 people who he decreed that would simply be left in an underground bunker to slowly starve to death. And when the 10 people were chosen, one of them cried out in anguish and said, what are my wife and my children going to do without me? And so Maximilian Kolbe stepped in. He offered to take his place. And that's what happened. He and 9 others were then left to slowly die in this underground bunker. But eyewitness accounts from the time told of how, in spite of these extreme situation of suffering, Maximilian Kolbe still somehow managed to spend his dying days to try to bring comfort and to try to quietly minister to the other 9 people. Someone else who was able to squarely look death in the face was Nelson Mandela. And when he was on trial, the Rivonia trial in 1964, he and his fellow charged very much expected that they might be facing the death penalty if they were convicted. Now, in the end, that didn't happen, but he did give up nearly 30 years of his life in prison in pursuit of trying to build a better South Africa. And Mandela, at one point, actually made the comment. He said that he who has not yet found what it is that to be willing to die for has not yet really fully entered into life. Sacrifice is a difficult thing. It's very problematic. And it's very countercultural, really. In the 21st century West, perhaps more than other generations who have gone before us, we're very much encouraged to put ourselves first, put me first. Be true to yourself. And in being true to yourself, in doing what's right for you, if you find something isn't working, then you're encouraged to give it up, to walk away and to do something else. I don't know if and in what circumstances I would actually be prepared to lay down my life for the sake of other people. But as the years pass, I do understand this more and more, that part of what it is in this life to be human is to be able to put aside our own wants, to lay down our own desires and our own priorities for the sake of other people. And sometimes that's for people who are close to us, but sometimes as well, it can be for complete strangers. So maybe in these days and weeks, maybe we should try to take time to give thanks and to reflect on those who have made enormous sacrifices for others in Afghanistan and elsewhere. And as we do so, perhaps we can try to grapple with this profound truth that it's only when we can really begin to lose ourselves for the sake of other people, that is when we truly start to grow as human beings. Our hymn today is "Brother, Sister, Let Me Serve You."